this game is cut into two parts, the action step and the resolution step. The action step is when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do while everyone else is trying to figure out what they're going to do and not knowing what everyone else is doing, and the computer's screaming at you. The resolution step is when you find out what actually happened. The action step is cut up into three phases denoted by the three sections of the board. So the 1, 2, and 3 is phase 1, 4 through 7 is phase 2, and 8 through 12 is phase 3. Throughout the action step, the computer will be giving you various instructions, and one of the instructions is when phases start and end. The game always starts with phase 1, and during phase 1 you can place your cards however you wish on these three places, look at them, and rearrange them if you wish. Once the computer ends the phase, however, you have to leave the cards as they are. So during phase 1, you'll begin with 4 action cards and 1 heroic action card in your hand. At the start of phase 2, you'll get to pick up the 5 cards on the phase 2 section, and during phase 3 you'll get to pick up the other 5 cards on the phase 3 section, adding those cards to your hand. So as you go along the phases, you'll have an increasing number of cards in your hand. The computer may also say incoming data, which means that each player gets to draw 1 card from the deck and place it in their hand. Or it may say data transfer, which means that you have 5 seconds to give another player any 1 card from your hand. Another thing the computer may say, and this is the crux of the game, is it may say incoming threat, and it will also give a zone of the ship, red, white, or blue, and a time, such as T+1. So if it said incoming threat, zone red, time T+1, you flip over one of the standard threats, you place a 1 token on that threat card. This denotes that this threat will come into play on the first turn, and it gives the stats on the card. These threats are what you have to try and defend your ship against during the game. In addition to the standard threats, there are also serious threats, which are a little bit more difficult. And there are internal threats, which come in standard and serious form, and which denote things that are going to happen on your ship, such as malfunctions or somebody boarding you and trying to kill you all. Now, each action card is split into 2 parts. It has an action, denoted by A, B, C, or the BattleBots icon, and it'll have a movement icon, either red, blue, or the up-down arrows. So each card can be played in either orientation, meaning that each card can be used either as an action or as a movement, depending on how you place it on your board. So for movement, there are 3 types of movement. There is red movement, meaning that you're moving towards the red side of the board, blue movement, meaning you're moving towards the blue side of the board, and the up and down arrows mean you're moving between the upper and lower decks. People can move red or blue freely, but if 2 players use the gravel lift during a single turn, then the first player goes as usual. The second player, however, is delayed, and we'll get into what delayed means in a little bit. So in each sector, there are 3 different actions that can be taken at the A, B, and C stations. And the A, B, and C action cards denote what action you are taking in that sector. We'll go over what all of the different actions do in the different sectors a little bit later. There's also the BattleBots action, which can only be taken if you have a BattleBot squadron with you. And again, we'll go over that in a little bit. So the A stations in each sector are the weapon systems. So wherever you are, if you take an A action, you are firing something. In the upper sectors, you have high-powered laser cannons. Now, each of these has a range of 3, and what I mean by that is, on each trajectory board, it's split into 3 distinct sections. So a range of 3 can hit anything on the appropriate trajectory board, and it does a number of points of damage equal to the number shown here. So the 2 outer upper laser cannons do 4 damage each, and the white zone laser cannon does 5 damage. On the lower outer zones, they have less powerful laser cannons. Again, they can reach all the way to range 3, so they can hit anything on that trajectory. However, they only do 2 points of damage each. And finally, in the lower white zone, you have your phase cannons. These are very weak cannons. They can only fire up to range 2, meaning that anything on the furthest part of the trajectory board cannot be hit by them. However, they fire and do 1 damage to each trajectory board. During the resolution phase, whenever you fire a laser cannon, you have to place one of the green energy tokens from the appropriate reactor on that laser cannon to show it's been fired. For the lower laser cannons, you use the yellow tokens, which are on their battery packs. Now, the green energy tokens, once that laser has done its damage, are removed, while the yellow energy goes back. So the lower cannons, while they don't do as much damage, they can be reused over and over and over again without extra power. So all of the B actions are energy actions which pertain to either the shields or the reactors. So when you take a B action in the upper zones, this means that you're charging the shield in that zone. When you charge the shield, you simply have to take a number of energy tokens from the reactor in the bottom part of the zone and move them up to the shield area. You have to draw it up to maximum, or as close as you can get to maximum, with the number of energy tokens in the reactor in the lower zone. In the lower red and blue zones, you are charging the reactors there if you take a B action. That means that you have to draw energy cubes from the central reactor to that reactor until it's full, or as close as you can get with the number of energy tokens that are actually in the main reactor. When you take a B action in the lower white zone, that means that you're charging the main reactor. So you have to remove one of the energy canisters from the game, and then you fill the main reactor up to 5 with cubes from the side of the board. Now the C actions are mostly miscellaneous actions, so they're for the most part different in each sector. I'll go sector by sector here. Now the C action in the upper white zone is dealing with the computer. The computer has to be dealt with at least once during each phase during the first 2 turns. If it isn't, then all of your actions are delayed past that point. To denote that you've taken this action, you simply take one of the gray cubes and place it on the appropriate part of the resolution board. In the lower red and upper blue sections, taking a C action allows you to either take or repair BattleBots. So if there are presently BattleBots laying in the appropriate section there, taking a C action lets you stand them up and place them with your figure, and they'll follow your figure around for the rest of the game. In addition, sometimes they can be damaged, in which case they're laid down again, and you have to bring them back to one of these 2 sectors to be repaired by taking a C action. In the upper red zone, the C action is the interceptors. If you have a BattleBot and you take the C action in this area, that means that you can fly off in these small fighters to attack things on the different trajectories. So if you're in the interceptors during the damage phase, they only have a range of 1, which means they can only hit the closest things on the trajectory boards. If there's only one thing that they can hit, they do 3 damage to it. If there are multiple things, then they do 1 damage to each. Once you're in the interceptors, you can continue to stay in the interceptors for subsequent turns by playing BattleBot actions. As soon as you have a blank space on your player board with no action card in it, you come back off of the interceptors, and on subsequent turns you can move around on the main board again. In the lower blue zone, the C action is to fire a rocket. Now you only have 3 rockets during each game, so you have to try and conserve them a bit. During the first turn, when you take the C action, you move the rocket to this space here. During the subsequent turn, you move it to this space, so it actually takes 2 turns before it does its damage, and you have to really think about that to be able to use them effectively. The range of a rocket is 2, meaning that it can hit anything on any but the furthest sections of the trajectory boards. And it does 3 damage, and it does that damage to whatever is the closest. You don't get to pick which trajectory board you attack. Finally, the C action on the lower white deck is to get visual confirmation. Now, the game is actually scored at the end of it if you want to do that. And getting visual confirmation gets you points. The more people you have doing it at the same time, the more points you get. Typically, this is not something you're going to be able to do until you've got quite a few games under your belt, but it is available to you. The final type of action is the BattleBot action. Now this can be used to fly the interceptors, as I've already said. It can also be used to attack internal threats. We'll go over how internal threats work in a little bit, but essentially, if you're in the same sector as an internal threat and you play a BattleBot action, then you use your BattleBots to attack that threat. So there are also 6 heroic action cards. Each player gets one of these randomly at the start of the game, and these are split into the two sections as the normal actions are, so the movement and action sections. But the movement and actions on these are a lot better than the normal ones. For the movement part, it'll simply show a diagram of the ship and one of the sections will be colored in. This card, when played as a movement card, can move you to that section of the ship immediately, no matter where you are. When you're taking an action with the heroic actions, the A actions actually give a +1 damage to the laser that you're using them to fire. The B actions let you draw +1 energy to the shields, or actually fill up the reactors with +1 energy above what they usually could get. And the BattleBot actions actually protect your BattleBots against being damaged, or let you do a +1 damage if you're using it in the interceptors. There are no C actions because these can't really be modified. So just as a note before we go through all of the threats, each threat may not show up in the exact same order during the actual game as it shows up with the computer. So the computer may announce a T+3 threat before a T+2 threat, but it will actually appear in the game in the reverse order. You should keep that in mind. So finally, I just wanted to go over how the threats work. So as I said before, when you place a threat, you put one of the numbered tokens on top of it. Now this denotes when it's going to show up, what turn, and there's also a second token of the same denomination which you can use to show where it is along the trajectory. So each threat has a name. It also has a speed, which shows how many spaces it moves along the trajectory board each turn after it's shown up. Shields, which shows how many points of damage it can absorb each turn. And health, which shows how many points of damage it can actually take before it's destroyed. In addition, each threat will have usually an X, Y, and Z action. Sometimes it might not have all of them, but each one will show what it does when it reaches the X, Y, and Z spaces along the trajectories here. Finally, each threat may have special rules attached to it, which will be listed at the bottom of the card. So the typical actions on the threats are to damage your ship. It'll say something like attack 1. That means that you have to take one of the damage tokens for the appropriate zone, flip it over, and place it on whatever system is shown. Typically that will hamper the system in some way, such as reducing the amount of power that a reactor can draw, reducing how much damage a weapon does, etc. I won't go through all of these right now. The internal threats come in two varieties. They can either be malfunctions or intruders. The malfunction threats will have a number of health, just like the standard threats. And when they are placed, they will show a zone and a type of system. You'll place one of the malfunction tokens in that area to show that the system is malfunctioning, and to fix it, you have to go there physically and take that action, which will do 1 damage to the threat. There are also intruder threats, and each intruder threat comes with a corresponding intruder token. So as soon as the threat is drawn, the intruder token is placed in the pictured zone, and then it will move around and attack you and do various things based on where it is on the internal trajectory board. The only way to combat intruder threats is to attack it with BattleBots. And intruder threats are either going to damage your BattleBots every time you attack them, meaning you have to repair your BattleBots, or they are not going to damage your BattleBots, which means that you can deal with them a lot quicker. Now, in the event that all of the damage tokens are utilized in any one zone of the ship, that means that you can take 1 more damage before you're destroyed. So once all of these tokens are out, the next point of damage you take loses you the game. Alright, just as one other note, during the action step, you can move these pieces around however you want, because this board will be reset to this initial position at the start of the resolution step. So you can use this to display to others what you're doing, although you can't show them what you're actually placing on your board.